What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back with another free agency video. And today, we are talking about one of the bigger names that is set to hit this year's free agency, a guy that was released very recently by the Seattle Seahawks, one of the top players in the National Football League for really the past decade. And the question is, should the Detroit Lions be interested? Because there's a rumor out there that the Lions are one of the teams out of many teams that have shown interest in this free agent. So let's get it started.
The city's been down and it found a way to get up. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up. And then it's going to take two more shots to knock us down. We're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Quickly, I want to throw in this little note. I probably should throw this in here before we get to the Bobby Wagner stuff. Just a little bit of Lions news. The Lions have also re-signed Ryan Mccollum and Rashad. Both of these players were exclusive rights free agents. So that's 15 of the 16 exclusive rights free agents are coming back for the Lions. Now, they're saying re-sign. I haven't been able to find the contract details on this yet. So I don't know if this is just a straight-up tender. I'm pretty sure they just re-signed these guys, which could mean longer-term deals for the outside linebacker for Rashad Berry, the former New England Patriot, who we had last season for a lot of the season, and also Ryan Mccollum. Now, the Ryan Mccollum one concerns me a little bit. This was the third center behind Evan Brown. He came in when Frank Ragnow went down to be his backup. He struggled big time last year, and that led to the Lions putting in Jonah Jackson at guard in that Packers game, but it makes you feel as if the Lions are kind of aware it's going to be very tough to bring back Evan Brown, who's a restricted free agent, because this is his best opportunity, and we said this before in our restricted free agent video. It's his best opportunity to go get paid, and it's probably the highest his stock will be to potentially have a chance to start somewhere, because it's not going to be here at center with Frank Ragnow as the highest paid center. So that's the concern out of this news. They may back up center for at least now. He may end up that next year. He'll at least have an opportunity to compete for it, the former Aggie. So the Lions are bringing him back as well, probably just as a depth option to come back and compete. I don't know. It could be his tender, just an exclusive rights tender, which would mean there's no guarantees, but I have not been able to find a contract details. So when I get those, I'll let you know. Welcome everybody to another video. Glad you guys are here, and we are back with another free agent video. And today, we're going to be talking about a linebacker from the Seattle Seahawks who is a 6-time first-team All-Pro, I believe a 2-time second-team All-Pro. I think last season he was a second-team All-Pro, which is just very incredible, especially considering his age. Bobby Wagner from the Seattle Seahawks. Now, this is a position heading into free agency that seemed a little bit light. Linebackers seemed a little bit light, and we know the kind of transition now in the NFL seems to be a lot of these smaller, more athletic sideline-to-sideline linebackers. And I'm sure it kind of will be a full circle at some point because, you get these guys, so the offense is like, well, how do we stop this? We just run right at them. So then the defense needs bigger bodies so they can slow it down, and all of a sudden the circle kind of repeats itself. But we know that's kind of where the NFL is going right now. When you looked at this year's linebacker class, it seemed like it was a little bit on the lighter side. Now, I'm not saying these guys won't turn out because they definitely could, okay? You shouldn't underrate some of these dudes. But it seemed on the lighter side, just a general overview of that positional group versus some other positional groups. I mean, the top guy was Devondre Campbell, who was signed to a very cheap deal the past offseason by the Green Bay Packers, but he broke out this year with Green Bay, had this incredible season, and he's looked at widely as the top linebacker in this year's free agency class for the linebacker position. But it's definitely one of those spots that is much lighter this year. This is another kind of part of the transition I think we're seeing a little bit in the NFL is some teams are playing a lot more safeties in the box. I mean, they're just trying to get a lot more athletic. So linebackers are kind of in a weird spot right now, but adding Bobby Wagner to the linebacker position in free agency this offseason definitely bolsters that position, and I think you can make a pretty solid argument that he's the best linebacker that's going to hit free agency this offseason. Reportedly, there are tons of teams that are interested, which does make sense, especially once I turn on the film. Now, I got to give some credit to Rad here. Shout out to my man, Rad. All right, he brought it up before yesterday's stream. Then he brought it up in the stream that he would love to have a guy like Bobby Wagner. And I was very hesitant on it. I was like, I don't know about that, man. I don't know about a guy like Bobby Wagner, his age, things like that. Recently, he was just released by the Seattle Seahawks. He was on a massive deal. 3 years, $54 million, like $18 million per year on average. And we kind of made this up a few weeks ago that usually why guys hit free agency, it's kind of like three things: injuries, age, or their production is not living up to how much they're being paid. Now, there's, of course, other instances here, like maybe you just need the financial safety. Maybe there was some kind of, issues between the team and the player. There's a lot of things that could happen here. And there has been some speculation that maybe Seattle tries to bring him back after releasing him to save some cap space, get him on a better contract, because they saved well over $10 million with their dead cap, I believe, only being like $3.25 million. So they saved tons of cap space. Boy, Seattle's going to look different. I mean, no Russell Wilson, no Bobby Wagner. I mean, what the heck is going to be Seattle now? This is not going to look familiar at all. It's going to be very strange. Hopefully Pete Carroll stays, but I'm just saying, this thing is going to look very strange very soon with the Seattle Seahawks. But now he's set to hit free agency. I guess there's been reports out there that he wasn't even told that he was released by Seattle. I don't know. I'm not going to get into that. The point is he's set to hit free agency in this linebacker market. And the question is, should the Lions be interested? Because there was a rumor thrown out there. I'm going to call it a rumor thrown out there on Twitter that the Lions would be interested. This isn't my rumor. This is according to Jordan Schultz on Twitter. And you know, you got to take these out there. Sometimes they're legit, sometimes they're not. This was said, it sounds like that he knows from someone that the Lions are interested, but I got to believe some of these are just made up, because it's like, not made up, come to fruition just because they're looking at it like, yeah, this team needs linebacker available, they're going to be interested. I think there's probably situations like that. So I don't know if the Lions are actually interested or not, but that's the report on Twitter. If they were, honestly, would not be shocked if the Lions were interested, especially as Brad Holmes continues to call this the player acquisition phase. You want to add players. This is probably the best linebacker that's on the market right now for this year's free agency. And the Lions have made it clear this is a position that they want to address. Now, we don't know how they're going to address it, but they want to address it. They want to add another linebacker. Dan Campbell said it during the Senior Bowl game. So let's talk a little bit about Bobby Wagner and whether or not the Lions should be interested. This is a 6', 240-pound linebacker drafted in the second round back in the 2012 draft. And he's been pretty darn good since he's entered the NFL. 6-time All-Pro. And again, this is voting, so I don't get too caught up in it. All-Pro, we know it's much tougher because with All-Pro, you only take, 2 by position. You have the first team All-Pro and a second team All-Pro. I believe he's been a 2-time second team All-Pro. I turned on the film because the first thing that sticks out with Bobby Wagner, of course, is his age. You have to wonder about his age. The guy's 31 years old now. He's going to be 32 years old in June. That's something that immediately comes to mind, especially when you look at the Lions situation. We are a younger team. You're looking at where we're going. And you think about a guy at this age, you wonder, the first thing that I immediately wonder is, okay, did he lose a step? Why is Seattle letting this guy go? I mean, he's just not the same player. Is it kind of like the Patriots thing? They let a guy go 1 year early. A lot of it had to do because of the financial side. Plus, they trade away Russell Wilson. So they're kind of in a different situation now than they were before. However, when you watch the film of Bobby Wagner, it is clear that this guy is still a stud. Okay. Now, I watched a little bit of some of his past years, but just watching 2021, the guy's still a stud. He had his career high this year in combined tackles with 170, according to Pro Football Reference. Also, his second career high, or his second highest in his career, with 93 solo tackles. His stat line, it really is remarkable. You think about 2 pass breakups, 14 coverage stops. His run stop rate was 61%. Obviously, his PFF grades check out across the board from this past year. 71.8 overall, 76.7 against the run, 70 in pass rush, 62.8 in coverage. It's not easy to play in coverage as a linebacker in today's NFL with all the speed that there is, yet consistently he grades out well in terms of coverage. And even this past year, he looked pretty good in coverage, and it stuck out to me immediately. This guy's a pure 3-down linebacker. He doesn't come off the field. It's an obvious pass down. He'll be the lone linebacker on the field, whether that's pass rush or dropping into coverage. He's a pure 3-down backer. At his age, pure 3-down linebacker. Now, I know coming out of the draft, he didn't do the combine because he had pneumonia, but he did do the pro day. He ran a sub-4 540. I mean, he was flying. I don't know if he's that speed, right? I don't have a GPS tracking to tell me if he's still that speed. Maybe he looked a little slower than that, but with Bobby Wagner to have that kind of consistency, it can't be just speed. I thought his change of direction still did look a little sluggish, and maybe that is kind of an age thing. It's also that he's kind of built a little bit. He's not like 215 pounds. He's 240 pounds. His game is definitely based on his instincts. To be as successful as he is, it has to be based on something like that. Took a look at that with Quandre Diggs, and I really saw the same thing immediately here, in both run defense and in pass coverage, but specifically in run defense, instinctually, he's on top of plays very, very quickly. Doesn't really miss tackles either. His missed tackle rate is extremely low for a linebacker. According to Pro Football Reference, they only had him with 12 missed tackles on 170 combined tackles. That's 6.6%. That's super, super low, okay? It does not get very high. Obviously, his run defense grades checks out. When you watch him, the guy will hit, he wraps up well, plays through the whistle. You'll see him kind of carry guys up until they blow the whistle. He's a nice run stopper, and he does a really nice job to me when he's kind of in that traffic, because when you notice with Seattle, they liked him coming downhill. It was clear they liked him coming downhill, especially on early downs. He does a pretty nice job kind of maneuvering his way through the small little pockets, right by blockers to kind of set himself up in position. I think athletically, he is a little bit of the bigger side. I think some of the change of direction isn't the most smooth. Bend around some offensive linemen, in space, things like that. It's not fantastic, but he also has enough strength to be able to handle offensive linemen at the second level where he can kind of play through it with contact, but also still make a play on the ball. So run defense checks out, no question. I mean, he is a very good run defender. So when I was like a little bit worried about his age and I pull in the film, like, well, he doesn't look like one of those guys that's like, oh, we're signing him. He's old. Maybe he'll give us one more year. Like, he looks legit still. And we've seen this at linebacker. We're about to talk about a guy in a second. We've seen this at linebacker where that's possible. And the same thing kind of shows up in coverage as well. constantly grades out well in coverage, constantly doesn't have a ton of interceptions. That his first interception this year came December 5th against the San Francisco 49ers. It was a nice play. They tried him with this play, actually, you get that step up, and then immediately he gets back, comes up with the interception. But he's usually in a really good spot. That's what you notice. He's usually in a really good spot in terms of coverage. He hasn't had tons of interceptions. He is a 3-down linebacker, so he's been in a lot of coverage situations. Statistically speaking, 71 completions allowed technically, according to Pro Football Reference, on 87 targets, but he's only allowed a 97 passer rating, which is not great. All right, it's not fantastic. 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. It's not great. Alex Anzalone last year only gave up a 75 passer rating, but he had a couple interceptions there. Hey, Alex did fine in coverage for us. He was actually pretty darn good in coverage, but that's what he's good at. But for the role that they ask of him, what you notice in coverage is he's not as much of a man coverage dropping linebacker because of the role he plays. He's done it at time to time. Mainly you see it at running back, and he diagnoses screens pretty darn well, pretty quickly. Going back to his instincts, same thing against the run. When they get a pulling offensive lineman, he can immediately get himself in position, kind of feel where the play is going, set himself up. Sure, he misses lanes here and there. For the most part, though, he understands his gap responsibility, and he's in the spot right away. You usually saw him under pretty good control in play action situations. Now, I guess certain teams play into that. If you're playing San Fran, you might be a little more willing to jump. His back pedal looks pretty smooth, too. I mean, he kind of quickly gets back, but I think what's good for him is he keeps a good base, a good balance, where he can transition from working upfield to immediately to that back pedal. He's not off balance. He's not falling over. Pass coverage, well, you don't see a ton of man matchups. I've seen a few. Tight ends, running backs are usually the matchup that he gets there. I'm sure in the past when he was younger, he had a little bit more man responsibilities, but it's also just part of the defense that he plays with Pete Carroll. And because of the defense that he plays with Pete Carroll, because we talked about with the Diggs video how much cover 3 it is, it's a lot of pressure on these linebackers in zone coverage, right? You have to be able to really play at the linebacker position, and zone coverage looks very smooth. He gets himself in a good spot. Even that Quandre Diggs pick that we look at, you see him kind of get over there, get in position where Jimmy Garoppolo has to fake this pass because Bobby Wagner's in a really good position. Sure, this is also part of the reason that his interception is low, is that, yeah, he doesn't move like a defensive back. That's the case with most coverage linebackers. They don't have that speed like a safety coming into the box, right? But for a 3-down linebacker, he's usually on his assignment, doesn't get fooled. There was a no-look Stafford tried to throw at him, didn't even flinch. Didn't flinch at all, didn't get moved at all. Looking to pass off the whole way, and he throws it right to his guy. It's things like that where it's like, here's where I have to be, I'm going to be there. There could be some limitations in man coverage. I think zone coverage suits him better because, again, it goes back to the instincts, being in position, things like that, versus man coverage where it's a lot of athleticism, and guys got open against him. So I think that's, he didn't do it as much, but guys can get open in man coverage. Tight ends, guys got space on him, but it's just diagnosing plays very quickly. So while I think he can have some man matchups, he's got a pretty smooth back pedal. He moves pretty well. I mean, here you go. You're going to see him run up the seam here with the slot receiver on this play. He still does move pretty well. It's not something that he did often, but the dude could definitely still move, and I think it's zone coverage very consistent. This is one thing that sticks out when you ask yourself, well, if he can play coverage like this, because he is a guy that dropped into coverage a lot, if he could do this can open up other guys to possibly be able to blitz a little bit more. And then you look at the pass rush side, and he's a pretty solid pass rusher as well. So he's got the build to get inside. He's not the fastest linebacker out there, right? But he can handle offensive linemen a little bit better than other guys when rushing. But really what sticks out here is kind of just the nuance as a pass rusher. Timing is huge as a pass rusher from the linebacker position. He's graded out really well here. Last year, he only accounted for having blitzed 41 times, but he had 1 sack on that. Compare that to a guy like Jalen Hurts, maybe in very similar range, but he had no sacks. The year before in 2020, he blitzed 100 times, and he had 3 sacks, so that's something that sticks out, including 12 pressures on the quarterback. It's not always easy to blitz from linebacker position. A lot more times it comes from timing and setup and the offensive line picking it up versus really beating a guy one-on-one. The big thing here is he's pretty fearless when he rushes. I mean, there's no tiptoeing through it, and he can kind of work through running backs, okay? Now, not as much offensive lineman, but running backs a little bit. He's got some upper body strength. We've seen him throw some long arms here. Watch him just play right through the contact. He's going to set up this running back a little bit, and then, of course, just kind of work through it. Watch him set him up a little step, bam, and then he works through him, and then he chases it down. A very well-rounded, versatile linebacker, and that's been huge for the defense that he plays in. Then you ask yourself, okay, is this a move that makes sense for the Lions? Well, why would the Lions be interested? For the reasons I just stated. He's a very well-rounded linebacker, can kind of do everything on the field from his position, and mainly his position with the Seattle Seahawks was playing that Mike linebacker role. He was a Mike linebacker in that defense. Now, we saw them draft Jordan Brooks out of Texas Tech, who did play next to him a little bit. Now, Jordan Brooks, we know his coverage. That's one side that, he was kind of limited coming out of college. Maybe he's the next guy to take over that position. They have some other options as well that stepped in for him. But Wagner consistently finds himself on the field. So there's the healthy side of it. He's a well-rounded linebacker. He's also a leader in that defense, which is huge. And that's something when you take a look at our defense, you're saying, well, maybe Lions could use that, a guy that could have that kind of impact. So immediately I think about the New Orleans Saints and I think about DeMario Davis. This is the thing. Linebackers can play older. They could play up there in age. I mean, we look at 31, we sometimes think it's just so old. It's really not that old, but at the same time, guys have been successful up through that age, even in today's NFL. Look at DeMario Davis, the guy 32 years old, and he's still playing at a very high level with the New Orleans Saints. The difference with DeMario is that when we saw the Saints bring him in from the New York Jets, they signed him when he was 28 years old. And when they signed him, they gave him like a 3-year, $26-something million deal. DeMario Davis still playing at a high level, definitely a little bit older than Bobby Wagner, but still playing at a high level. And he immediately, when he came in to a defense that was struggling to stop the run in New Orleans, things changed. And there's other parts of that as well, but things changed, right? He was a leader of that defense. He pulled it together. The run defense has been great in New Orleans since that time. He's been a leader and a very reliable linebacker that you know what you're going to get. He's kind of just that cornerstone that you have in the interior. And while, yeah, he's maybe aging on paper, the guy's still playing at a very high level. So those are reasons I immediately point to of why the Lions should be interested for all the reasons above. Pro Football Focus is projecting he gets a 1-year, $8 million deal. Now, the deal side of it makes things very interesting as well. There's always a question, well, would Bobby Wagner be interested in Lions? You'd probably say no, he's not going to be interested in Lions. We know that money always talks, and I don't know what he's looking at. Maybe he is looking at like, hey, I'm 31. I want to go play for a team that's going to win. I'll take less money to do that. That may be the case. A team like the Rams, who usually don't invest a ton in linebacker, could be interested in that. Maybe, I don't know. There's probably teams out there. I don't think the Rams will because I don't think they're going to invest that much in a linebacker. But money does talk, and I don't know what he's thinking, so I'm not going to go too far into that side. Very possible that he would rather go to a team that, at least over the last year or so, has proven that, yeah, they're kind of in contention. Now, for the Lions, coming off a rough year, your mindset as a coaching staff and as a front office is that we're going to get into contention, right? We're going to compete. This is not going to be a team that's just going to be 3 wins every single season. That can't be your mindset. You're just a player acquisition phase. We're bringing these players in that can help us get there. But what's interesting about the contract situation is how many years do you give him? Let's say he was interested, and if you gave him this deal, he would take it. How many years do you try to lock up a guy for Bobby Wagner for? That's where it gets interesting. A 1-year deal. Why would 1-year deal make sense? He would kind of be like a stopgap at that point, because linebacker is kind of light with the Lions. And if you drafted someone, he could kind of, he could play a 3-down linebacker role. His age. And even though he hasn't really shown a drop off, you never know that could just happen. So at least you're not locked in long term here. He always does seem to come back to the scheme side. But of course, you don't want to avoid talent just because if you're saying this is our scheme. The Lions have shown they're going to be flexible based on what they have. But I think the reason you have to bring this up is because of a guy like Derek Barnes. You look at Derek Barnes. They trade up to get him round 4. They say when we draft him, you're going to be our Mike. He's going to win number 55. That's what he's going to be. And he's still in that developmental process. He's only been playing that position for 2 years. Some improvement in coverage specifically as the year went on, but it still was not great as a whole, right? We know that he's still got a long way to go. It becomes a big question because I look at a guy like Bobby Wagner and I view him as his best fit, kind of playing that Mike linebacker role. Like if you're going to sign a guy to a multi-year deal like Bobby Wagner, just age aside, I feel like his best fit, maybe even because of his age, I guess, is playing that Mike linebacker role where his responsibilities are being a top run defender, which he's going to be. That's coming. Coverage, more zone drops. I think he's pretty athletic. He's an above average athlete, or at least on the average side in today's NFL for the linebacker position. The sideline to sideline speed is not something that sticks out necessarily, but I think for him, his role will be really reliable, consistent zone coverage dropper, can do some man coverage assignments, would be really good against the run, would be that leader in your defense. But when you talk about if you're going to sign him to a multi-year deal, let's just say he would accept a multi-year deal. Now it's like, well, this is best suited for us, right? Because he might be here. We don't know if a downfall is going to happen soon or if it does, right? His best suited to play Mike. I don't think it's going to come to a thing where it's like, yeah, well, he's actually better, playing the will linebacker position. Are the Lions going to be like, well, hey, maybe Derek Barnes can be that guy where we can blitz him more? He's got to improve big time in coverage if that is the case, or is he kind of like a 2-down linebacker next year a little bit, right? Is he more of that where we saw Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks play together, but when it got to 3rd down, the other linebacker came off the field, it was a defensive back, right? So it also comes into play if you have to look at Derek Barnes' development. What's the long term for a guy like Derek Barnes? Are you going to get creative with Barnes if you brought in a guy like Bobby Wagner where you're like, hey, we can play him as Sam because I think he can pass rush the heck out of it? We just know he needs to improve in general. So is your outlook, he's the future Mike? Because then a guy like Bobby Wagner, if you're going to sign him, make more sense to a very not cheap, but very short-term deal. Ideally for the Lions on paper, it would be to give him a short-term deal. 1 2 years max at the spot, but probably preferably 1. He may not want to accept that, right? He may be like, yeah, I'm not taking that, because he might want more stability than a 1-year deal. And I would completely understand that. That's why I feel like this is unlikely that this actually ends up happening with the Detroit Lions. But I think preferably that's what you'd want to do. As your draft pick in the mix, he can also help that player as well. And he kind of is like a stopgap as well, but a very high level stopgap where he kind of plugs that position where it's like, okay, we don't need to push this in the draft because we're coming in with a really good linebacker next season. Not a long-term option, but he's a really good linebacker, so it opens up our how much we have to press for this position when it comes to the draft and things like that. Of course, at that point, if you had Bobby Wagner next year and you had, him and Derek Barnes, they were going to play off each other well, and you're like, hey, we'll just try to re-sign him and bring him back. I think that would be the ideal scenario for the Lions when it came to a guy like Bobby Wagner, and it's why the Lions should be interested. Definitely think this is a draft where the Lions can add linebacker help and get immediate help. Obviously, Chad Muma comes to mind because I like Muma is a very good zone dropper. All right, he is an outstanding run defender, just like, Bobby Wagner. Of course, he was only doing it at this college level, but he was the best run stopper in the nation. So you look at a guy like that can blitz. I mean, there might be even some similarities there in terms of build as well. Chad Muma's just taller than Bobby Wagner, right? So guys like that. I think there's guys that the Lions could add in this year's draft. So I think if you're looking at a guy like Bobby Wagner, it's ideally a short-term deal. A long-term deal, it would just put into question maybe what you view for Derek Barnes. If the Lions would have a clear plan for that, then I think you could do it. But there's a lot of risk that comes with it. The issue with the short-term deal is it feels like the Lions may be a year away from something like that. Filling in gaps is something I believe the Lions will continue to do. And I think they started that. They plug holes a little bit. Plugging holes with their guys works really well, like the Josh Woods, like the Ryan McCollums. Plugging holes is cool, but plugging a hole with a guy that for 1 year may be looking $8 to $12+ million, that's a lot of money to spend. The Lions have cap space, especially after Trey Flowers cut. That is a lot of money. And yeah, you could add a void here, and you don't want to do all that stuff, though. It's still a lot of money for 1 season for a guy. It feels like the Lions may be a year out from that, where 2023, they may be able to do things like this, where they're not only at that point plugging holes, but they may be going like the Rams did, signing him down and Kitsu to a $14.5 million deal for 1 season, because you're just like, he's really impactful. And then you also have to get to the positional side. Is the position value there where it makes sense for us to spend that much money at that spot? If we're going to give out a 1 year, $8 to $12 million deal, let's just say it's in that range, would it make sense for us to give out that kind of deal to a different position that we feel may have more positional value, like a defensive line, like a pass rusher, like a cornerback, right? Like a safety, something like that. As a prediction alone, the way I see it playing out is I don't see Bobby Wagner coming here, which I know is like, well, mind-blowing. Yeah, I don't see him coming here. I think he'll probably look to go elsewhere as well. I don't know if the Lions would invest that much at this spot. I feel like when you look at our free agency, look at our cap number, right? You look at where we're at after Trey Flowers cut, around the $30 million range, depending on Josh Brown's contract. When you look at kind of the range that we're in financially, it feels like the Lions, could use some of that on the safety that they feel like could be a long-term option. Obviously, Marcus Williams come to mind, but someone that's a little bit younger that maybe they feel like they could bring in. But if the Lions do feel like they want to get a staple, like a really good player at the linebacker position for the next season or next couple of seasons, I think they should be interested. Obviously, though, I don't think it's going to end up happening, but I think there's a reason to be interested at the spot. I think what will end up happening is the Lions may sign someone from another team or a guy like Jalen Bax, something like that. I don't think Alex is coming back because to me, I think Alex was kind of that mentor. He was supposed to be the mentor for Derek Barnes last year, that 1 year mentor kind of guy. And Alex Anzalone had the athleticism where you could play him at will linebacker and he could drop into coverage. I feel like he was kind of that mentor supposedly last year for Derek Barnes. And now it's Derek Barnes' time to shine. And that's kind of how they're looking at this, which is why I don't think Alex Anzalone ends up coming back to the Detroit Lions. But definitely think you can make it work because there is a lot of talent here with Bobby Wagner. Don't see them investing a ton in the linebacker position. I mean, look at the Rams from 2013 to 2020 when Brad Holmes was there. And picks they put in position. The first year he was there, they took Alec Ogletree with the first-round pick 30, who was only there 4 years, didn't really work out. Then a 7th-round pick, a 6th-round pick, a 5th-round pick, a 7th-round pick, a 7th-round pick, were the other draft picks at inside linebacker for them. And then this year we know that we have a 3rd-round pick in Ernest Jones, who is not part of drafting, and they have a UDFA at the other linebacker position who were starting for the Rams this past year. So the Lions are in a different situation. They have more draft capital than the Rams have had most of the time, especially at the higher ends of the draft. And every team's in a different situation. We've seen the Saints usually hit mid-round, 2nd round, 3rd round for linebacker. So I do believe the Lions will address this in the draft. Free agency, regardless of what free agency happens, I think they're still going to address this in the draft. And I'm cool with this being a 2nd round, a 3rd round pick. Heck, even one of maybe up to pick 32. I wouldn't use it at 2. That's the cutoff. Okay, the cutoff is our 2nd first-round pick at the earliest. I would think 34 back though. Perfectly fine. And it could end up actually being 2 linebackers. One for sure, maybe a guy you feel can plug in and play at will, whether that's a Christian Harris, someone like that out of Bama. Maybe you wait a little bit later. I think there's some depth here as well in this draft, especially when you look at the type of linebackers and the type of linebackers I think the Lions need. Like, the type of linebacker I feel like Lions need is an athlete that can fly sideline to sideline, work downhill, blitz, help in coverage. I know that sounds like a lot, but that style is much more prevalent. That's a huge word. Hold up. I can't spell that, and I don't know exactly what that means, but that's what it feels like in today's drafts. So I think the Lions will hit it in the draft higher than the 7th, 6th, 7th, because we just have more draft capital and we want to add help there. Dan Campbell's made that clear, but just signing that deal to a guy, Bobby Wagner, who I'm assuming is going to want more come to Detroit than maybe another place because we haven't proven that we've won yet. It just feels almost like a year away, doesn't it? Like, if the Lions are successful this year, they go 9 wins plus, and then next year they start investing more, this makes a lot more sense. But it just kind of feels a year away. But I'm not counting out because I'm a very big fan of Bobby Wagner. His film does not lie. He's legit. And if they brought him in, it's not like I'm like, oh, dang, what are we doing? What are we doing? No, I'd be hyped. And the two biggest reasons I'd be hyped is, number one, run defense, because I think he could come in and kind of bring it all together, where the Lions got to stop the run first, and we struggled at that. We've been kind of struggling at that. Just like the Demario Davis impact, the guy is a very good run defender, can play downhill, and the leadership side. That's also what I think would be a huge addition here. Just the stuff that you don't even think of, the leadership that he would bring. Of course, the development he could help with some of our young guys, our draft picks, our Derek Barnes guys like this, Jalen's. But the leadership that I think he would bring to the defense as a whole. Like, he would be the guy that players kind of look to, right? They have coaching staff, which is fantastic. But when you have a player in your locker room that you look up to, you're like, okay, this guy, hey, listen to this guy. Listen when he talks. That would be a huge impact for our locker room. At the same time, I don't think you should ever not be interested in talent when it becomes available. So that's kind of my thoughts on the situation. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Bobby Wagner's available. It'd be cool to sign him, no question. He's a beast. But at the same time, I don't think it'll end up happening. Thank you, bro, for watching, and I'm out.